my name is Amber Maravelli, and I work in staffing and classifications at NUWC Keyport. And I'm here to say that NAWC is open for business.
My name is Joshua Markley, and I work in the in-service engineering department at NUWC Keyport, and I'm letting you know that NAWC is open for business.
Hi, I'm Craig Campbell with the contracting department over at NUWC Keyport. We've obligated over $20 million in funding in March, and I'm here to say that NAWC is open for business.
NAWC is open for business.
Well, good morning. I want to welcome everybody to our sixth and final industry engagement for our NUWC Keyport engagement series sessions. My name is David Walls, and I am the Deputy for Small Business here at NUWC Division Keyport. And today I'm happy that you're taking some time out for the day to spend an hour with us. We have a great session today with our contracts department. As you can see, we have a poll coming up. We just want to know who's here in attendance today. And before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to Miss Tiffany Scroggs, one of our PTAC partners. Tiffany?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for Dave and the rest of the team for partnering with PTAC to bring today's Industry Day to life and to the internet. So welcome to all the attendees. I'm with the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers known as PTAC. We provide no-cost assistance to firms working in the government sector or seeking to find contracts within the government sector. We have locations in every state in the union, including Guam and Puerto Rico. And here in Washington State, we have several locations designed to help businesses navigate different government sectors. You can see our contact information there or find your local PTAC at that link. We're funded in part by the Defense Logistics Agency, and our services are offered at no cost. So we welcome any and all businesses coming into the marketplace to contact us for some technical assistance. With that, I will be monitoring today's chat along with a couple other folks. So look forward to today's event. Back to you, Dave.
Great, thank you, Tiffany. So you can see the poll results are in, and that is, we could see that there's the majority small businesses here. That's great. But before I introduce today's speakers, I do want to establish some ground rules. We will just be monitoring a chat box today. We're not going to be monitoring the question and answers. So if you do have a question, please start the question with the word question or maybe with a question mark. That way it'll be easier for us to find a question over just a comment. Today's session, like I said earlier, will begin with an overview of our acquisitions department presented by the Chief of Contracts, Ms. Carrie Lawson. This will be followed by a briefing on doing business with NUWC Keyport presented by the Deputy Department Head of Contracts, Ms. Karen Smith. We also have online contracting officers ready to support any questions that might need to be passed off to them. And I also have our TechBridge partner, TechBridge Director, Mr. Johannes Schoenberg online as well. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Ms. Carrie Lawson. Ms. Lawson is the Contracts Department Head and Chief of Contracting Office and has nearly 29 years of experience in NAVC and NAVSUP contracting, with expertise in both the shipyard and warfare center environments. With over 10 years serving as a senior manager within the organization, she has provided assistance in strategic thinking and planning, tactical planning, workforce shaping and development, metrics analysis, and external engagement. And with that, I'm gonna hand the floor over to Carrie, and Carrie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Tiffany, as well, for all of the work that you put into hosting us on this virtual platform. Those of you who've been with us through multiple industry days probably remember that I like to warm up the audience with a little bit of humor before we get into things. And I was thinking of just what kind of joke would be right for now, and maybe just the pros and cons of working virtually or conducting this virtually. So I've got a list. I'll kind of read through them. So pros. I wrote down it's not as nerve-wracking, but I might need to strike that because it is a little nerve-wracking, making sure you've got your Wi-Fi, you've got your connectivity in all sorts of ways. And you should have heard us before we started this live. We sounded like a landing crew for the Mars rover. Another pro, this is funny because I am looking right down at my notes, but I don't have to look away from the audience to read the slides. And then third, I don't have to take off my reading glasses to look at the audience. So I may end up putting some reading glasses on during the course of this. So the cons, you get to see me in my bad 70s haircut, gave it to myself during quarantine time. You may or may not hear a dog barking in the background somewhere in this neighborhood or in this house. And third, don't get to visit with you in person. That's the biggest con. I know that we've all enjoyed our time during Industry Day, either at the off-hour social or during the many meetings I've had in the hallway with you guys in between our activities. But hopefully our next Industry Day will be back to normal and we'll get to do this again in an other than virtual environment. Okay, so Dave, let's get us started with the next slide. I'm going to start out with a broader picture of where we are in the Navy and how Keyport fits into it. My set of slides will paint that bigger picture, and then Karen's going to talk to how to do business with the government. So you'll see here the FY21 budget request is virtually flat compared to last year. I think it's a little less than 1 billion above last year's, FY20 budget. Within that budget, we have a few key points I laid out for you. We're looking for a deployable battle force increase by FY21 end from 293 to 306. You'll notice that the operations and maintenance is $2.6 billion higher than FY20. And then we do see some decreases in infrastructure and weapons procurement. So that is of note that the OM&N is higher. There's some emphasis there. And you'll see in some slides later that I point out there's an increase in R&D as well. Next, Dave. So this is kind of hard on the eyes, but what we're trying to say here is that we buy a wide range of services, the bulk of it in engineering and technical support. The percentage of services is over 57% in engineering and technical. And then beyond that, we have anywhere from data collection to facilities maintenance and hazardous waste disposal. Next, please, Dave. So this shows a different slice of the pie, so to speak. You'll see again that we've got services making up more than 50% of what we buy. Our FY19 obligations, we had projected $194 million. Well, we achieved $194 million last year, and they were projecting for FY20 $241 million. I think right now we're approximately 190. So clearly we're much busier than last year, which is something that I think that we can all be proud of in contracting and technical community, as well the contractor community coming together to achieve that much by this time this year in a different environment, like I said. Now you'll see the electronic countermeasures portion, the miscellaneous electrical and electrical components. That accounts for our TIH contract. That's why that's so large. Some of you may have some questions about that, as large as it is. And then we have torpedoes and components that we think will be growing because we are taking on some work from the headquarters. Then fire control designating and indicating equipment, we may grow there as well. Next, please. So this is also a slide that I brought over from the last industry day, updated obviously to show that we are in a continuous environment of systems and structure changes. There's a longer term push to integrate all of our acquisition systems into the integrated acquisition environment. You will have seen that we've consolidated a number of them into the Beta SAM cloud. And then going into the future, we have over a dozen DoD contracting writing systems that have outdated technology. The migration timeline for the next gen contracting writing system, EPS, is between pretty broad range, FY20 to FY25. And then in the course of all this, we do have increased data consolidation, data mining, and a move toward portfolio management. Now, what does that mean, portfolio management? I think I did touch upon this in the last industry day, and of course, this trend has accelerated where we're using smart tools, possibly some AI, some early generation AI, to data mine and look at labor categories. You'll see that in our eCraft that we've used with our own contracts for the last couple of years to collect labor rates and try to see trends across labor categories. We continue to see a roll-up of that information so that at the highest levels of the Navy and the DoD, we'll be looking at portfolios of types of services, the labor categories that go into those service categories, and whether there are trends there that we can identify and leverage. I don't think that the Navy or DoD is there yet. We may be a few years out from seeing some products that come from those efforts, but you will see a continued consolidation of our electronic systems and the data within those systems. You'll notice that the source for this information was version 3.0 of the DoD Strategic Plan for Defense-Wide Procurement Capabilities. It's an interesting document, and it was most recently updated in March of this year. It gives you kind of a flavor for the intent for the use of these systems and the future of them. Next, please. So within this broader picture slide deck, I wanted to make sure that we touched upon the environment in which we're working. We're getting some increased flexibilities through DoD appropriations at authorities. You'll see here I've highlighted the Section 233 authority. It refers to the pilot program for the enhancement of RDT&E centers. And what it does is it gives the warfare centers the ability to apply approved flexibilities to generate greater efficiencies, more effective operations, and yes, I'm reading this straight from the slide, and rapid development of warfighter capabilities. This is language that comes straight from the statute. So what these flexibilities, they relate to policy and regulatory implementation. They don't necessarily allow us to strip statutory requirements, but we have been able to leverage that authority to do some good things here at Keyport and across the warfare centers to help get things faster into the warfare fighter hands. So 3 that speak specifically to contracting I've listed here. We've increased the purchase card authority to $10,000 with relaxation of some purchase card rules. Then we've obtained delegation of facility repair and sustainment contracting. And we've used delegated signature and approval authorities to shave time off of some of our contract award times. Next, please. So I don't know how much of our audience is interested in facilities work, but you saw in the previous slide that we have obtained delegation for doing some of our own facilities work, where previously NAVFAC has been doing that. We'll continue to use NAVFAC. However, for certain types of work, we feel that perhaps we can get faster response and perhaps higher quality services if we do it ourselves. And this slide gives you a sense of the amount of that work that we may be taking on over the next 3 to 4 years. We plan to ramp into it. We've already hired a couple of people, and we're familiarizing ourselves with this different type of contracting. In general, there are about 45 to 60 projects that we estimate per year with this work, and a budget of between $10 and $12 million. Next, please. Okay, so this is really an eye chart, but the intent of this is to tell you that we're also leveraging another type of authority. It's been around for a while, other transactional authorities, dash prototypes, and its intent is to be used with RDT&E funds. As we've pushed the usage of this authority, and higher ups have been more, I think, receptive to the usage of the authority, we were asked whether or not we would want to set up our own OTA or family of OTAs. And as I called around and talked to community, the contractors in the community, as well as contracting officers at Newport, it became clear to me that that companies invest a lot in terms of standing up a consortium like this. And I'm not sure that the amount of work that we would put through our own OTA would be enough to recoup those costs. So where it makes sense, we're going to be using other people's OTAs, and that's why I wanted to provide a listing of what OTAs warfare centers are working on, which ones are in place and which ones are pending. We've used the Newport OTA for, I think, at least one project, and we've got 1 or 2 pending. We look for the right type of project and certainly need to have the right kind of money. Next, Dave. So there's another type of authority, Section 2373, and it provides for purchase of items that are for experimental or test purposes in the development of defense supplies. And you see here a listing of those types of items that can be procured under this authority. In general, for Keyport, we're looking at possible usage of this authority for telecommunications. That may seem a bit odd, but for signal and telecommunications in an undersea environment, we see some potential for usage of this authority. It does allow us to sole source when the quantities are experimental. Next, Dave. Now, this is the end of my part of this presentation. I'm leaving you with some points of contact for who to go to if you want to do business with us. And then Karen will be taking over to talk to the specifics of how to do business with Keyport and with the Navy. And then we'll be available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, so much for your presentation. Before we have Karen start, I believe we have another poll question. We might have 2 more poll questions. So let's go ahead and run those poll questions. It gives Karen a little bit of time to have her last sip of coffee or water and clear her throat before she starts speaking. Also, I wanted to let people know on the line, we have an Echelon 5 buying command out in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and we do have their contracts department head on just in case there's some questions that come his way. And we also have a purchasing card program, and we should have our purchasing card person who runs our purchasing card online as well. So we should be finishing up this first poll, and then we have a second poll that we want to show before Karen starts speaking.
And while people are also taking the poll, I want to remind folks that we're watching the chat function if you have any questions for either of our speakers today.
And thank you to that 40% that have come to all of the Industry Day sessions, and hopefully they've been helpful.
If you're not seeing the polling, it might be hidden behind one of your other pop-up boxes on your computer. So you can kind of toggle your boxes around there. You might have to hit escape if it's in full screen mode. And if you miss the polls, it's not that big of a deal, but click around, you'll find them.
Tiffany, they may think this poll is a trick question because we asked if they're user friendly.
Well, there is a correct answer in there, according to me.
Yes, yes, we would both agree with that.
They have to guess which one we're talking about.
Beta Sam is most user-friendly.
All right. Wow. Way to go, Beta.
That's good.
Good
all right. So thank you all for participating in our poll questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Karen Smith, the Deputy Director for our Contracts Department. And Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you all for joining us for Keyport's Virtual Industry Day. My discussion today is geared towards companies who really are newer to doing business with Keyport and the government, and those of you who want to start doing business with us and how to get started. Next slide, Dave. So as I was preparing for this presentation, I became painfully aware of how challenging it must seem to companies who want to start doing business with the government. There's numerous systems and platforms and acronyms that I think it probably can feel very overwhelming. But frankly, I think even for many businesses who have been doing work with the government for quite some time, that it seems challenging for them as well. So please don't let that deter you from beginning your journey in working with us. I know our time is limited, so I'm going to provide you a crash course in some of the systems and acronyms that you'll need to become familiar with, how you can find some of the business opportunities, getting your company ready to submit a proposal, and things you want to consider and understand when you're preparing your proposal and when you're awarded a government contract or purchase order. Next slide, please. So first I'm going to address some of the systems and contract vehicles that we at Keyport are using to post announcements and procure our supplies and services. The first system is Beta Sam, and Beta Sam hosts much of what was previously posted on federal business opportunities, which you'll commonly hear referred to as FedBizOps or FBO. And for us, Keyport previously posted its annual forecast of acquisitions on FBO, but in FY21, we'll be changing that and posting it on Beta SAM. And that annual forecast is going to provide for you a projection of our obligations for the year for the various types of supplies and services that we think we're going to be procuring in the upcoming year. The other area is the FPDS NG. That's transitioning right now to Beta SAM as well. And when you go to that platform, what you'll find is you can look up the agencies that procure the type of items that your company supplies. And so that's a good place to go to look at the agencies that you would probably want to be doing business with. And the other thing that you'll find on Beta SAM is the contracting opportunities. Most of government opportunities are posted in Beta SAM, and Keyport does post many of theirs as well. And so it's that contracting opportunities portion of Beta SAM, you want to go there often so you can be looking at what's coming up in the future and what you're going to want to be submitting proposals on. The next system is the Solutions for Enterprise-Wide Procurement. It's the SOUP contract. And it's a multiple award suite of contracts for information and technology solutions. And Keyport has just very recently started utilizing the SOUP for some of our IT supplies needs. And there are currently over 140 contract holders, including 110 small businesses. And while there's not an opportunity to on-ramp onto the SOUP vehicles right now, they're encouraging interested companies to reach out to current SOUP contract holders and to partner with them. And so if you're looking for some partnering opportunities, I've provided a link there, and you can go and look at what some of those opportunities may be. The next vehicle we utilize is the Seaport Next Gen contract. And the Seaport Next Gen was awarded in December of 2018, and it replaced Seaport E. And Seaport Next Gen is the Navy's platform for acquisition of support services. And many Navy agencies are utilizing Seaport Next Gen, NUWC, NAVAIR, NAFAC, ONR, and many others. And there's 23 functional areas that, that support the Seaport services. And so you can look at what those are to see if you'd be interested in providing any of those services. And as Carrie mentioned, there's a number of services that we procure for Keyport, including software support services, in-service engineering, program financial management, and many others. And so most of those services for Keyport, we do procure through Seaport Next Gen. And the good news is that if you are not currently a Seaport Next Gen contract holder, you can become one. The rolling admissions is scheduled for January of 2021 with a projected award date of June of 2021. And so if you are interested in becoming a Seaport Next Gen contract holder, I encourage you to go to that website and sign up so you can become one. And we also utilize GSA eBuy to a lesser extent. And so you'll find some of our procurement opportunities are announced there as well. Next slide, please. So getting your company ready to submit a proposal or a quote on one of our procurements. There are a number of systems that you need to be registered for in order to make your company ready. The first one is the System for Award Management, SAM. And the SAM platform hosts many of the previous systems like central contractor registration, online representations and certifications, the excluded parties list. And so you'll need to be registered there. But one thing to make sure that you know is that you don't need to pay to register for SAM. There are many businesses out there that actually charge a fee to register for SAM. And so I recommend that you go to the website that I've provided there because it is free to register for an account. And you'll need to renew your account annually. So before you submit a proposal or quote, just make sure that your reps and certs are updated and that your account is active. The next system, the Dynamic Small Business Search, it's not required for you to register there, but I highly recommend that you do because many agencies, including Keyport, perform market research utilizing this tool to identify companies in a given area that provide the supplies and services being procured. And this research will help the contracting officer determine what type of a set-aside to use for their procurement, and determine if they think they're going to get competition in any given set-aside category. And we also use it to identify potential vendors. The next area that you'll need to register if you're doing business with Keyport is the Joint Certification Program. Because for Keyport, we have many procurements that have data, and it's most typically the drawings that are Arms Export Control Act restricted. And that means that only vendors that are JCP certified will have access to this data. And so when we were on the FedBizOps platform, the contracting officer or contract specialist could just procure or just post the procurement in FedBizOps, and they could identify it as restricted. And then the system would automatically only release that information to companies that qualified. BetaSAM, however, doesn't have that functionality currently. And so the contract specialist or contracting officer will get a notification, and they'll need to go and look and see if you're JCP certified, and then do a manual release of the information to you. And so things to know about the system is when you register in JCP, you're going to identify a data custodian for your company. And that data custodian is the only person that that information is releasable to. And so that means that when you submit your request to get that data, it has to be the data custodian that asks for the data. Otherwise, your request will not be granted. The next system is the VETS reporting system. And in order to be eligible for a contract or purchase order award, you need to be registered. And the VETS report will require you to report on information on the number of employees and new hires during the reporting period who are protected veterans. And so you'll need to register and update annually by September 30th of each year. Next slide, please. So now your company is registered in all the systems, and you're ready to submit a proposal or a quote on a procurement. So some things that you're going to want to consider and remember is first, becoming familiar with the Federal Acquisition Regulation, the FAR, and the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, the DFARS. And for each procurement, there's going to be different aspects of the FAR and DFARS that will apply. And so you'll just want to be looking at and having a good understanding of what's required for your specific procurement. And there'll be a number of clauses and provisions that will be identified. And the difference is at time of award, the provisions will drop off of the documentation because those provisions only apply before award. The clauses will remain throughout the life of the procurement. And you'll notice that many of the clauses and provisions are by reference by full text. The full text are only the ones that need information to be inserted by the contracting officer. And so all of those clauses and provisions that are provided by reference, you're going to want to make sure that you go and look at the full text of those as well. And there'll be a link in the RFP or RFQ that will get you to the actual full text of all of those clauses and provisions. Also, one thing you'll need to note is when procurements are set aside, there are restrictions not only for the prime contractor, but there's going to be limitations and restrictions on the manufacturer, producers, and subcontractors. Additionally, there's going to be variations of those depending on if the procurement is under the Simplified Acquisition Threshold, the SAT. And the current SAT threshold is $250,000 for most procurements. There'll be many clauses and provisions in your contract that relate to the Buy American Act or trade agreement. And so there are numerous nuances to the Buy American Act and trade agreement. And there's too many to remember, and they're changing frequently. And so for each procurement, you should just go and look at which clauses and provisions are applying to your procurement. And you'll notice that for some procurements, there's going to be restrictions on some countries and some sources. And so you just want to know what those are to make sure that you're not proposing manufacturers from countries or sources that would be restricted. Additionally, the evaluation will vary depending on whether you're proposing a domestic item, a foreign item from an exempt to Buy American Act manufacturer, or a foreign offer that's not exempt. And those variations in the evaluation can be very confusing. And what I found is that the DFARS PGI 225 is a very good resource for really depicting and giving you examples of how your quote or proposal will be evaluated based on the type of manufacturer that you're proposing. And so I highly recommend utilizing that PGI 225 to get a better understanding of what those requirements and restrictions would be. And questions and clarifications that you may have when you're looking at the RFP, RFQ. If it's unclear, ask a question. And make sure you ask the question before you submit your proposal or quote, because any unclear assumptions can be very costly and frustrating after award to both you and to the government. Additionally, some assumptions may render your offer to not be considered. And so make sure you ask any questions that you have, and make sure you ask it in enough time that the contracting officer can do research and respond and issue an amendment if necessary. And make sure you review the RFP, RFQ in its entirety, and you know exactly what's being asked to be submitted. Again, incomplete proposals would be considered non-responsive. And for many of Keyport's procurements, you'll find that a technical proposal is required, and the level of what's going to be asked for will be identified in that RFQ or RFP. Additionally, sometimes there's a cost breakdown that's asked for or supporting information. And so just looking at looking at everything that's required and making sure you submit a complete proposal. And for some of Keyport's procurements, our inspection acceptance timeframe is different than the constructive acceptance timeframe of the 30 days. It's not uncommon for us to have 60, 90, or sometimes more days for us to do our inspection and acceptance. And so one thing to note is that you won't get paid until the period of time passes and your item has been inspected or accepted. And so just be aware of that. Also, do not add your own company terms and conditions. I've noticed, I think, that some companies just automatically put their terms and conditions in with all of their proposals. And we really ask that you not have your own company terms and conditions submitted, because if any of those conflict with our requirements or our restrictions, potentially your offer may not be considered. And so please don't include those in them. And so now you've taken the time to prepare your proposal and do everything that you need to get ready to submit it. So make sure you submit it on time. Waiting to the last minute could cause it to be late. And even if your proposal is 1 minute late, typically it will not be considered. And sometimes the electronic systems can be somewhat unreliable. And I'm finding with numerous people teleworking right now, some of those systems can even be more unreliable. And so just make sure you're submitting your proposal in plenty of time for it to get to us timely. Next slide, please. When you're submitting on some of our IT services or IT items, you'll notice some restrictions. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about the HP and Cisco restrictions. And so you do need to be an authorized dealer or reseller when you are submitting on those items. You know, for the Cisco items, there's different certified partner levels, gold, silver, and premier. And so just knowing what those are and making sure that you're authorized to provide the item that we're requesting. And you will need to be an authorized dealer or reseller at the time you submit your quote, and you'll have to submit proof of certification. And so if you do have any questions on that, I recommend you reach out to the contracting officer to get any clarifications that you may have to see if you can submit on those items. Next slide, please. So what to expect when you receive a purchase order or contract from the government. You know, once it's awarded, you'll be emailed a copy of the award. For Seaport Next Gen, the notice will be sent to you via the portal. And so just carefully review the order and confirm receipt of it. If there's any inaccuracies, just notify the contracting officer immediately. Also within your order or contract, it'll typically identify a technical point of contact or a contracting officer's representative, a core. And you can reach out to that person to get technical clarifications. If you need information on the drawings, those people can provide that clarity and have those technical discussions with you. That person, however, is not authorized to negotiate any changes to the specifications or the scope, and they cannot change the delivery schedule. And so if you feel like anything needs to be actually changed in the documentation itself or the time frame, you need to reach out to the contracting officer, negotiate any changes, and then it'll be done via a formal modification to the contract. And at any time, if you do determine that you're not going to be able to meet the delivery date, notify the contracting officer as soon as possible. And so you may be wondering, will the government change the delivery date if you ask? Will you be held accountable? What sort of black mark might there be on your record if you delay an award? And so, or delay the receipt of an item. And so it really depends on the circumstances surrounding the delay. There are things like government caused delays or, acts of God, and there are clauses in your contract that would apply to those things. And so we'll look at those things and help us determine if that extension is allowable. But either way, if you let the contracting officer know as soon as possible, we can be working with you to mitigate any delays that, mitigate any impacts that may be due to that delay. The next slide, inspection and acceptance process. I talked a little bit about the inspection and acceptance, but something for you to know is that if we are inspecting your item and we identify something that is a discrepancy or does not meet the requirements, we'll draft something called a vendor discrepancy report, a VDR. And when we do that, we'll issue that to you and we'll identify what the discrepancy is. And then we'll allow you the opportunity to correct the deficiency and submit it again. And if that happens, most likely if you've already submitted an invoice, it will be rejected. And then once the item has been delivered, inspected, and accepted, then it's time to get paid. And typically that payment time frame will be net 30. So you can expect to be paid 30 days after we accept the item, if you've already submitted your invoice, or upon receipt of a proper invoice, whichever is later. And the system that you need to be familiar with for invoicing is the Procurement Integrated Enterprise Environment, PI, and it hosts WAF and My Invoice. And so you just need to make sure you're registered and familiar with this system in order to get your payments processed. And so that concludes my presentation, and I believe we're now going to be hosting a panel to answer questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dave. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Karen. I appreciate that briefing. And so, Tiffany, do we have any questions out in the field right now?
Yeah, we do. And one of them's for one of the panelists. So maybe do you mind introducing the other panelists and then we'll go to questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. So we do have online right now Miss Erin Malinsky, and she is the division head for Code 022, which is the In-Service Engineering Support Division. We also have Mr. Peter Gervais online. He's from the Torpedo Support Division, which is our Code 024. We have Mr. Frank Dugan online. He is the head of contracts at the NUWC Logistics Center in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. And we also have Mr. Johannes Schoenberg from our Tech Bridge, who's online as well. So with that, go ahead with the questions.
Very good, thank you. A question for Mr. Dugan. At the previous NCLC briefing, you mentioned your fence line to fence line inventory support contract. Can you describe the scope of that work, of that effort, and then how to follow up with you? And I believe you are muted. Let's see if we can unmute you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, there you go, thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So that is a support order that requires an extensive amount of travel. It's about going around to all the warfare centers and basically making sure that they're going to be ready for their audits, or at least this work is a piece of that. So you're talking about work at all 10 warfare centers and potentially multiple satellite sites of warfare centers. So there's quite a bit of travel involved in it. It will be in our long-range acquisition forecast, so we'll get some stuff out that way. It will be in our what we call our Service Requirements Review Board submittal for this year. So that'll give you some, if you see that long-range acquisition forecast, you'll get some more indication about the scope of it. It's a large effort.
Thank you for that.
Over.
Hey, this is Dave. Hey, Frank, I have a quick question for you. For that effort, will that be a single award or will that be on Seaport Next Gen?
So right now, I'm saying it's going to lean towards being a single award. There are some things that would prevent me from putting it on Seaport, but I need to have a conversation with Ms. Lawson, Ms. Smith, and Keyport Legal about if we go away other than, because right now I will tell you it is a directed 8A award, and so I need to think some things through with the folks with smarter brains than mine, and we'll eventually know our way forward. But I think it's leaning towards a single award right now.
Thank you.
Not set in stone. Over.
Thank you for that clarification. That's helpful. So as we encourage folks to ask more questions via the chat function, this is your opportunity to talk to very knowledgeable people about how Navy purchasing works. And correspondence after the fact will go through Dave. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about your process for meeting with firms and capability statements and what you like to see in those?
Great, thank you. Yes, so I get requests for meetings in a lot of different ways. One is through, events such as these or in-person events. I do work closely with PTAC, and sometimes they'll send over company information for me, as well as our contracting officers and contract specialists. They will a lot of times send me over contact information from companies. And what I do with that information is I will look up your company information in System for Award Management. I'll look at your NAICS codes that are tied to your company within SAM, and I'll run a 3-year NAICS report for NUWC Keyport, as well as Mechanicsburg, and I will just see if it's a good fit. If we have NAICS codes, if your company has NAICS codes that we do contract actions against, I will send you that report, and I will set up a follow-on meeting with you. And then I'll also add you to our small business search feature, which is in our internal system that our requirements generators, contract specialists, contracting officers can use as they're doing their market research. Another thing that I'll do for the companies that are out there, the small businesses that are out there, is I will do a check of our business opportunities, or excuse me, our contract opportunities within SAM, Beta SAM, and see what's out there, and I will send you an email. I'll go in that small business search tool, put in the NAICS code, and you will receive an email from me that points you to that opportunity. And as we all know that NAICS codes are pretty broad. It might not be in your wheelhouse. However, I want you to have that opportunity to take a look, because it may very well, be in your wheelhouse, and like baseball, the best baseball players are successful 3 out of 10 times. So who knows? Maybe one of those will be in your wheelhouse, and you'll be able to propose and have a successful bid here at Keyport. So anyway, that's what I'll do. I get your information in a lot of different ways, and if you haven't connected with me in the past, please send me your capability statement, and I'll do those things that I said I would do. I'll do that 3-year NAICS and try to set up a meeting with you. Also have a great partner with our tech bridge. Mr. Johannes Schoenberg is online as well, and I'm going to probably pass the mic over to him so he could tell you a little bit about what he does and what our tech bridges do. But we also work together to try to help you navigate through, government contracts. So Johannes, do you want to just share a little bit about you and what your office does?
Yeah, absolutely. So good afternoon or good morning, everybody, wherever you may be. So there's kind of two sides to the Navy. There's the sort of traditional FAR-based contracts, which we just talked about, very much through beta SAMs, and that's the process. So there's another side to this too, which is sort of the R&D side, research and development. If you have new tools or new processes that aren't traditionally part of the Navy or the ecosystem, or kind of more on the R&D side of this, that need development, think technology readiness level maybe closer to 7 or 6 or something like that. We have a whole process kind of through a series of tools called sort of non-FAR based contracts and agreements. And so we have tools that we use, statutory authorities as a laboratory that we can use to connect to your products and kind of give feedback and stuff like that through things like tech transfer authorities like a CRADA or a partnership intermediary agreement, or we have different tools that we can kind of partner with industry on to kind of help advance those technologies, provide feedback and that sort of thing before you would get to a full-scale contract. There's also opportunities. I posted a couple of links like SBIRs, Small Business Innovation Research, and the PTAC can help you just as much with those. There are opportunities for sorts of that we post, both Air Force and Navy, all the federal agencies post these opportunities for these kind of products, a new development that come out. And some of that R&D comes out through beta SAMs as well. So like for our COVID response, there's a new type of conveyor belt. We try to push that out to everyone it's part of our ecosystem, but a conveyor belt that's not traditionally made by industry, but it needs to be kind of larger and fit in a different configuration than currently made. So it's sort of an R&D project for shops, particularly rapid prototyping shops that are out there to kind of create. So it was a $100,000 project, and I think that solicitation went out and then was reviewed and closed a couple weeks ago. So there's opportunities like that that kind of intermix between beta SAMs, and they're not your traditional sort of large scale contract, but kind of one-offs. So kind of an interesting interface between these non-FAR and FAR-based contracts. These tech bridges, there's 12 of them across the country out of similar warfare centers. Newport has one, and they're working closely with their PTAC as well. And so we're all kind of interlinked on that R&D kind of non-FAR-based side. So thanks.
And we do have 2 questions I'd like to get through before the top of the hour. One is from Jeff. It says, after a quote has been turned in, what can we do to follow up with the quote and find out how we compare with the winning quote? How can we find out why we didn't win in order to improve our quoting process? I don't know if Karen or Carrie, you want to take that one first?
I can take that. So the best thing to do is ask for a debrief, and the debrief provides information about, like what was the award amount for the company that was the awardee, and as it compared to yours, and it will give you, certain, if there's technical grading, it can give you some of that technical grade information about the awardee, but not details, but it'll tell you basically how your proposal was evaluated, and it'll identify, if there was technical criteria, it will provide any weaknesses or deficiencies. Many times it'll identify the strengths as well. And so really the best thing to do is to ask for a debrief to be able to get that information so you can continue to improve your proposal. And if any of the other panel members want to add in, please do.
PTAC will add in here just if the quote is a rather smaller dollar amount and a debriefing process is not available for some of those smaller ones. Sometimes just chatting with the PTAC, we can help you uncover past awards and other information that might be helpful to know how competitive you are against your competition. So a conversation with PTAC might be helpful as well. Now the last question here, how would a subcontractor go about connecting with primes? And I think this was mainly geared towards NAVFAC, but I guess the question is still for Keyport as well. Dave, you might want to take that, or Karen or Carrie.
So I'll take the first swing at it, and then if anybody from the contracts department wants to chime in. So with as far as like subcontracting, whenever there's a requirement that's coming up, we'll try to do a sources sought if it's a new requirement. And in the sources sought, we'll typically ask a question such as, you know, are you interested in being a prime or a subcontractor? And with that, you know, we can, you know, maybe set up some communication with or provide incumbent information or even some company information of those companies that we would expect may propose. That way you could start building teaming. We also will sometimes do industry days for particular requirements. And in those industry days, those are great ways to network. And you could start meeting some of those other than large partners or even small businesses that would be looking at being prime contractors. I also want to just encourage you to go to some of the larger outreach events such as Navy Gold Coast or the Navy Sea Air Space, because we do have a lot of government contractors. And you know what, how can I forget? Alliance Northwest, which is the largest industry event here in the Pacific Northwest. But go to those types of events, because there you'll also meet a lot of business partners that may have some of these projects on their maps and planning for, and they're also looking for small business partners. You could also always reach out to my office, and I'll try to do my best to connect you with some companies. So anybody else from contracts want to add to that?
Actually, you covered quite a bit there, Dave. I know for most of our seaport ones, we typically try and put who the incumbent is somewhere in the RFP documentation so that you can be reaching out to the incumbent contractor. I believe you can also see, you could go to the portal to see who the Seaport Next Gen contract holders are, to see if there's anybody you'd want to reach out with there. And so I think that those are probably the primary things that you can do. And like for some of the contracts, I tried to, like for SOUP, I provided the link of where you can go to potentially identify who those holders are to become partners with them as well.
This is Carrie. Dave, I'm glad that you mentioned the Alliance Northwest. The times that I've gone to that event, it does seem that a lot of the participants and panel members there have a strong background in construction related contracting, facilities related contracting. So if you are interested in that particular niche, that's a good event to attend. And I want to call out Dave for all of his efforts that he's put into matchmaking events. And I think that the individual who asked this question is prompting us to try to look forward to how to do that virtually. We've done that in conjunction with industry days in the past, and Dave is spectacular at it. So I think we can leverage that going forward as well.
It looks like we have one more question. Do we want to take it, Dave, or do you want to follow up with George Lucas after the event?
So sorry, Tiffany, I wasn't looking at the chat box. What is the question?
Do certified destruction programs fall under Seaport Next Gen, or would they be posted competitively on Beta SAM?
So for certified destruction programs, I would think that would fall under a single award under and advertised under beta.sam, but Carrie or Karen or any of the panel members, in any of our service contracts, is there a destruction program piece in any of those service contracts?
I am not aware of that being under any of the 23 areas that is under Seaport Next Gen. I don't know if we'd have to probably look at the various specifics of any particular time that was needed, but I'm not aware of that being one of those services.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and as far as a good NAICS code for that, George, we could probably look at past award history to see how government is posting that under which NAICS code. That's usually the best way to go about it, unless anyone off the top knows the NAICS code for that classified or just certified destruction.
Yeah, George, you could send me an email with that, and I could do some research. I don't know it off the top of my head.
You don't have them all memorized, Dave. That's amazing. All right, that concludes our questions, Dave. You want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, thank you so much for Carrie, for Karen, for presenting today. Thank you for all the panel members that were standing by and ready for action to answer questions if needed. And, you know, I want to thank, of course, Washington PTAC for providing us support for this event and all 6 of the events. Thank you so much. This session, as well as all the sessions, are being recorded, and they will be posted on our public website. And the slides as well will be posted on that public website as well. This does conclude our Industry Day engagement sessions. However, it doesn't stop me from reaching out to you. The last Wednesday of every month, I will be hosting a Wednesdays with the Deputy for Small Business, which kind of does an overview of Keyport, and I always try to take a snapshot of what's current on beta.sam and what's coming up in Seaport, so you guys could start planning that. Registration for Wednesdays with the deputies is on our beta.sam website as well. And then always stop by the NUWC tables at some of these outreach events, and we could meet one-on-one and you know, set up some other meetings. If you need to, out of all of these industry events, if you want to try to have a meeting with some of our presenters, please contact my office, and I'll see if we could set up a meeting with some of our technical folks. And they are all very busy, and sometimes we might not be able to set that meeting up when you want to, but please be flexible, and we'll see what we can do. Again, please use our Tech Bridge director, Mr. Johannes Schoenberg. He can help you out with any R&D questions, or if you have any new innovative ideas, you know, we could work with our Tech Bridge partners. Please don't forget about our friends over in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. They also have contract opportunities that I have displayed on our Seaport forecast. Again, I want to thank all of our presenters, and I want to thank everybody who is in the audience, and my office is always open. So with that, I'm going to end this, and thank you again, everybody who was here today.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.